Hello, this is Wycliffe Sakala, American Center Director. Thank you for joining us today to discuss why culture matters. We have two speakers, an American and a Zambian, who will discuss why it is important, why culture is important, including how culture can be a force for good, in promoting tolerance, in promoting national unity and peace. This panel discussion is one of the activities by the US Embassy in Lusaka through American Spaces to engage Zambians and Americans on issues of common interest. We also hold discussions on various other themes, including the workshop, including entrepreneurship, governance, democracy, health, and education. So before we get to our discussion this afternoon, or this morning, depending on where you are, let me say a few more words about how we promote cultural understanding between Americans and Zambians. Other than this discussion that we're having today, the US Embassy also promotes numerous cultural exchange programs to create opportunities for Zambians and Americans to learn more about each other. Whether it's through the Ask Envoy program, American Film Showcase, or American Music Abroad program, Zambians and Americans have opportunities to share their talents and develop their skills and promote mutual understanding. For example, our music programs help us to raise awareness about issues affecting our communities, whether it's climate change, or whether it's youth participation in elections and other civic issues, or whether it's advocating against early marriages or GBV. We use music as a tool to promote social change. So thank you once again for all of us, for everyone for joining us, wherever you're watching us, wherever you're listening from. We hope that you're going to enjoy our conversation today on why culture matters from an American and as well as a Zambian perspective. At this point, let me turn it over to our moderator, Mulinda, who introduced our two speakers, as well as the session in detail. Thank you. Over to you, Mulinda.
Okay, thank you so much, Wycliffe. My name is Mulinda Siamasuku. I'm the American Corner Coordinator at the American Corner located here in Lusaka at the National Institute of Public Administration. As Wycliffe has mentioned, I would like to welcome you to our panel discussion, our virtual panel discussion that is going to look at cultural matters, the Zambian and the US perspective. So on the panel, we have two panelists. We have Ms. Franchesca Minikon-Reece, the immediate past Assistant General Services Officer at the United States Embassy here in Lusaka, and she's joining us in from the United States. Franchesca, good afternoon or good morning with you, and you're welcome to the panel discussion.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Okay. And we have Mrs. Chilufya Chiwisa, a training manager at Peace Corps Zambia. Ms. Chilufya, good afternoon, and you're welcome to the panel.
Good afternoon, Melinda. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, Franchesca.
Okay, so basically the purpose of having this discussion is just to highlight some of the similarities and differences between the Zambian and the US culture and how culture can help us promote peace and unity. So generally speaking, Chilufya, are you able to just give us a general perspective of what you think culture is? Not in the Zambian perspective per se, but generally what culture is.
Thanks, Melinda. Before I give you the perspective of what culture is, I wish to say this. Allow me to dedicate this discussion to the first president of the Republic of Zambia, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, may his soul rest in peace, who worked so hard to ensure our country remained united through his ideology, humanism, and the slogan, One Zambia, One Nation. And of course, we are One Zambia, One Nation. And I implore every peace-loving Zambian to make sure they work towards this just cause. Thank you. Culture, in brief, is integrated system of the way people live. So it is encompassing all regions, all countries, race, wherever you are, the definition is the same. And culture refers to the total way of people's living, what they do, how they make life move on, things that they make to define them. It also includes what people think. These are the customs, the language that they use, all fall under the culture. It also includes ideas, beliefs, attitudes, as well as social behaviors. And all these are shared among a particular group of people so that as they live, they really understand each other. So before I go to talk about the importance of culture, I would like Franchesca also to add to what culture means. Franchesca, over.
Morning. Thank you, Chilufya. So for me personally, culture defines how people behave and interact with one another, how they communicate with each other. And it defines, our behaviors, our habits, and how we develop relationships with each other. I think a lot of times people associate culture with one's ethnicity, their nationality, but it's really the art of interacting with another human being. So that's how I define culture from my personal perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Franchesca. And so Melinda wanted us to talk about the importance of culture. Okay, so major among everything that we've talked about, culture is the core of every society. They say a society without culture is a dead one. So every society has to be defined. If you're not defined, then no one is going to define you. Culture enhances belongingness. What do we mean by this? If I'm a Tonga, the culture of the Tonga people define me and I'll feel, a part of those people. That's the importance of the culture. It brings people together. We have places where our culture is stored, places like museums. You don't just find one kind of people there. There are a number of them. And I'm sure my colleague Franchesca from the United States has been to our museum just to see what the Zambian culture entails in there. Cultural heritage also broadens people's horizons. It helps people to understand what other people do, because you may just believe like what you do is the best, but if you broaden your horizon, then you're going to understand what other people do. And of course, your perspective on life will be very rich. So Franchesca, what do you think?
Chilufya, I totally agree with you. I think a lot of times people forget that the United States has many cultures. It's a very diverse country, and you have different regions of the US. You have the North, you have the South, you have people on the East Coast and the West Coast. And although all of those citizens of this one country share the same nationality, as you visit different parts of the country, just like in Zambia, people have different ways of living, different meals that they eat, different types of cuisine, different types of music that, brings and adds passion to their lives. So it's really important that when you're looking at a country, you're not just using one story, because even though the citizens of that country share the nationality, as you travel around a particular country, you'll see that people do have different types of culture within this one nation. So I think that's really important what you said about being open to different cultures of
So from, I think from the definitions that you've given and also the importance of culture, it's, I think what has come out is the culture of diversity for both the Zambian culture and the American culture. So from that point of view, I would like Chilufya to just state what are some of the cultural elements that define Zambians, and then Franchesca can come in and just define what are some cultural aspects that define Americans. Chilufya.
Thank you, Melinda. And before I answer that one, I just want to add what Franchesca said. The culture is the vehicle through which we tell our stories. we tell our past, we define our present and also our future, because if we don't have a culture, nothing will exist. Thank you. Now for me to talk about the elements that define Zambia, you find that there is a strong identity in Zambia. Our many tribes have lived in harmony for so many decades. And of course, we should not stop doing this. So our first president, David Kaunda, may his soul rest in peace, really ensured that we had that national identity. And through his slogan, One Zambia, One Nation, it really put us together to know that every Zambian is free to live wherever they want to be. As long as you're a Zambian, you are free to move around throughout the country. And so that symbol of One Zambia, One Nation really unified us. You find that in cities, there's strong interaction. It's a cosmopolitan kind of, life in the big cities. And there are many tribes. And because there are so many tribes, intermarriages are a common thing, which is a beautiful thing. Personally, I have 4 tribes in me, and that makes me very proud. I cannot pinpoint one tribe to say I'm Bemba because my mother comes from another part of Zambia. And so I can say that slogan that our president, the late, coined really unifies us. And it is one of the things that can really tell that this one is a Zambian. Apart from that, I can say that we have common staple food, which is called Chiwundu, Nshima, Buhove, Uwali. And this one is something that you'll find everywhere. You won't lack. Go to Western province, you'll find them eating the same food. Go to Southern, Eastern, Northwestern, Muchinga, to mention a few. This is the common thing that unites Zambians. Even when I travel out, the first thing that I will miss is Nshima. So Nshima is synonymous to being a Zambian. And also family values are one of the things that you can call is a unique thing that can really identify us Zambians, because we are collectivist people. We believe in living as, a group, and the success of, one person is the success of everybody in the group. And that's why if I quote our first president in his book, my letter to my children, he stated that no African child will be orphaned, because even if I lose my parents today, the neighbor in the village has to take care of me. My uncles have to take care of me. So that is what really defines us Zambians. And another important aspect is that I can travel today to Eluvale land in Northwestern. I'll be welcomed and I'll feel at home as though I'm back in my place. So you find that most Zambians are very hospitable, and that is what defines us, the family values. Thank you, Melinda. Franchesca, you can.
So Chilufya, as I think about my experience in Zambia, the friendships I've made and the colleagues that I work with, family values was very important. And when we talk about the different cultures, I realized that we had so many similarities. We focused on the importance of family, the family unit, the importance of friendship, the importance of hard work. And I think some of those similarities help to bridge the, maybe quote unquote cultural differences between some of the Americans and Zambians. And I think for that, I was very fortunate. When you talk about your background, as an American, I'm the first generation American of Liberian immigrants. My parents are from Liberia. Uncles, aunts, my family originates from Liberia. My mother also has Ghanaian heritage. So, we were American children growing up in America in an African household. So I think a lot of those experiences also help shape our experience in the US. I think when you talk about the cultural elements that define Americans, and we've had this discussion before, the United States is a very diverse place. A lot of times it's often referred to as a melting pot. And I think it's important that you for people to think about America as a country of immigrants. You know, a lot of times people do refer to the US as a country of immigrants. And the US culture was shaped by, you know, Native Americans who are on the North American continent, you know, initially, shaped by Latin Americans, African Americans. You know, remember slavery, you know, you had people who were Africans who were transported to the United States and enslaved. And those generations of, and those like hundreds of years of slavery have also had an effect on the American culture. I think it's, you know, a lot of times people don't sit down to talk about the importance of culture and, you know, breaking it down. I mean, you have food, as you mentioned, Chilufya. You know, as an American, I loved eating in Shima, you know, and I saw how important it was to have the meal and how it brought people together. And that's how it is at home as well. You know, food always brings people together. And you remember Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield when she talked about diplomacy in the kitchen, you know, gumbo diplomacy, I think she mentioned, you know, and I think a lot of times people forget the power of food and how it can bring people together, even people with different opinions, because once you put food in front of someone, everyone becomes a friend, you know. So I think for me, I really enjoyed my experience in Zambia, not just because of my role as a professional, but just as a human being, meeting different people from different parts of the country and having those opportunities to talk about our differences as Americans and Zambians, but then also the similarities we shared as, you know, humans, as parents, as employees of the embassy, as lovers of music and food. So it was in history, you know, because that was something else that you just mentioned, Chilufya. And I know that as we continue, we'll probably talk about the influence of, you know, music and how we use music to tell stories as well of a country's history and its shape and its future. Yeah, I think, you know, having these discussions about what defines different countries and our different cultures, it gives us the opportunity to also talk about what our similarities are, you know, so we can talk about what we share as well. You know, so thank you.
And before we go to the next question, another thing, Melinda, that unites us is, you've seen my scarf here. This is Zambia. The name Zambia is a cultural thing. So from the time Zambia was coined, this is the unifying factor for us Zambians. I'm proud to be called a Zambian. Everyone should be proud to be called a Zambian. And we should strive as much as possible to maintain our country, a peaceful country that is known beyond borders. And so this is one of them. Thank you, Melinda.
And I'm also wearing my Zambian colors as well.
That's beautiful.
This was actually
what's the outfit, Franchesca?
my colleagues in GSO. Yes.
So for someone that's just looking at what we are talking about, or someone that's just joining us, obviously when they hear the word culture, it would just be an umbrella statement, culture and but Franchesca, from your experience, looking back at some of the years or the months that you spent here in Zambia, what are some of the key cultural differences and similarities that you think exist between Zambia and the United States? Obviously, you've worked with, you worked with a lot of Zambians and you had Zambian neighbors, Zambian friends. What are some of the things that you can point out, some of the elements that you can point out as similarities and differences?
Okay, well, so I spent about 2 years in Zambia. And although a lot of people will say that 2020 was just a very different experience, but fortunately, I didn't leave the country. I stayed here, even as we all managed with COVID. So I was fortunate to remain in the country. So, you know, I mean, the obvious is the language, you know, Zambians speak English, Americans speak English, you know, so that's very obvious and you can get that out of there. But again, when I talk about my personal experience, you know, a lot of us focused on the importance of family. You know, I have colleagues and I have friends who, when we would talk at lunchtime or sit and chat at the water fountain, we would always talk about family, trying to check in about how everyone was doing. People would talk about their role in their family and how it was important to show support when a family member was not well or family member was struggling. So from that perspective, I felt like a kinship, because from my perspective as well, my personal experience has been the important role that family units play in one's life. And I derive a lot of energy from my family. You know, I find that when my family unit is solid, it helps me to also stay focused and be resilient. So I felt that having those discussions with my colleagues and friends in Zambia, I saw similarities in that respect. I think also that also allowed me to get to know people when we would talk about different tribes and you know, different regions of Zambia, because you know, I didn't get to travel to all parts of Zambia, but fortunately in the office I would get a chance to talk about where people were from, and we would talk about the importance of language. And you know, some of the colleagues I have spoke multiple languages, and then you know, because I didn't speak Bemba or Nyanja, I would, you know, pick up a few words. But we also had this environment in the office where people would, you know, tease each other because of, you know, being from different tribes. And I know initially I had to be educated on that as well. So I think, you know, having those experiences allowed me to learn about Zambia and ask questions, you know, ask questions that I may not have been able to find answers to in a book. So, you know, I know you talked about what are some of the differences, but for me, it was really important to talk about some of the similarities, because a lot of times you find that there aren't many differences other than the fact that I'm from the US and my colleague is from Zambia, and then that's where it stops. You know, I also have colleagues in Zambia who also had left Zambia and had traveled around the world as well. So talking about their experiences outside of the country, we also found similarities in how we approached entering different cultures and meeting different people and expressing this appreciation for living outside of their culture for a limited period, whether it was a year or 2 years, because they came back home with this appreciation of different cultures, and it helped them to understand, you know, life in it from a different perspective. So I think, you know, that was also a great opportunity for me. And, you know, being in the office allowed me to get to know people. You know, we talked earlier about the importance of food and music. You know, last year the embassy did the virtual celebration of Independence Day, and we got the chance to work with some of the local artists. And that was really exciting, because, you know, these were not just people who were just entertaining people, but they were using their music to communicate messages. And, you know, you've heard of protest music. You know, you have artists who use their platform to share with their listeners about the plight of people who may be struggling in the country, whether they're hungry or maybe suffering from being marginalized. So listening to some of these artists and listening to their lyrics is also something that I found very interesting, because, you know, at home we also have artists who engage in protest music. I'm sure you've heard of, you know, Billie Holiday and Woody Guthrie. You know, music is really important in telling the story of a nation. You know, it's not just for entertaining and dancing, but, you know, when you find some of those artists whose lyrics are like, they're like history books, you know, it's really, really important. So, you know, just Melinda, just to kind of go back and answer that question, I think, generally speaking, or you know, I found more similarities between myself and Zambians than differences, you know, so hopefully I answered your question, but and maybe that was just me searching for a similarity rather than looking for a difference. That could just be me.
Yeah. So Chilufya, would you add on to just add on something to what Franchesca?
I'll echo actually what Franchesca said. The major one is language. We both speak the same language. And then I wanted to say, both Americans and Zambians are people. Regardless of the color, they are people, and they have feelings. They you know, we act in the same way. The only differences I'll bring out are really subtle. The first one is the power distance. Our cultural, you know, inclination in Zambia is that there is that hierarchical kind of way of life, which is not common in Franchesca's country. So for me, if I'm in a group where there are adults, older people than I am, I have to show that respect. If there's, for example, only one chair, I have to give a chair to somebody who is older than me, regardless of my achievement in terms of work. And then directness. You find that our friends, Franchesca is an example, are so direct in giving you feedback. For us, we go, you know, the roundabout way when we are trying to give feedback, because we want to keep relations. We don't want to hurt feelings. And that is one of the cultural aspects that you can find in Zambia and not in America. Of course, you know, there are some people in America who may also act like us. And then the communication styles. If I'm a daughter to somebody and I want to talk to my father, I have to go through my mother, because that is the way we communicate. We don't communicate directly. It is just a way of showing respect. And then Franchesca talked about food. Really, food is one of the unifying factors. She told me she loves bean leaves, which if she had not left, I was planning to really cook so that we enjoy the cultural meal together. But unfortunately, she left earlier than I expected. And then time. In Zambia, time is elastic. If you tell us we are meeting at 14, definitely we'll come at 16 hours. A thing which will really anger our colleagues in America. But of course, some Zambians like I'm sure Wycliffe, Justin, and Melinda here have learned to make sure they stick to the schedule, because time is money, according to what our colleagues say. So those are some of the subtle differences, apart from what Franchesca said. Thank you, Melinda.
Melinda, can I add something? I want 2 comments quickly. When Chilufya, you mentioned about directness. So I remember in the office, and this happens whenever you work overseas outside of the American culture, but I do recall having those discussions with my colleagues and those individuals who reported to me to explain my communication style. So, you know, it takes some time because you also have to gain trust from everyone. And then as we got to know each other, became familiar with everyone, I started to slowly explain my communication style and explain the reason for being direct. And I think once people understood and I explained that my purpose is not to chastise you or be disrespectful, it's really to get as much information as possible, because I am also reporting to someone else. So a lot of times it was important to be direct, because if we were in a meeting, you know, we had to check in, find out what the updates were. And it was important that people shared in a direct manner what their challenges were, what kind of support they needed, because in my role as a GSO, I also had to report to my boss. So a lot of times I would explain to everyone, I said, okay, let's make sure that we're all on the same page, because when we leave here, I will also go and update someone, and that person will update someone, and that person will update someone. So we want to make sure that when we all leave the room, we all leave understanding the same action points. Because I've been in those situations where, like, for instance, Chilufya, you and I are in a meeting, and we're like, hey, great. Here's what I'm doing. This is what you're doing. And then we both leave. And then maybe a week later, our paths, we just were not thinking the same thing. We had different understanding of what the goals were. So I think when I put the importance of being direct in that context, that's when people understand. They say, okay, we understand why you have to ask questions in this way. We understand why you have to, get information in this manner. So then I think people understand and they appreciate in that sense. And then in terms of time, I definitely have learned, even doing Peace Corps, being in Burkina, working in a village, you can't expect people to be looking at their wrist, because a lot of people I worked with, they didn't have watches or anything. So even in that moment, I learned to adjust. But I think in the office, I know that we talked about this a lot, is just the importance of being respectful of other people's time, because oftentimes you will have people scheduling a meeting with you, and then I have to consider that, okay, after I meet with Chilufya, maybe she's running to another meeting. So if I'm late for this meeting with Chilufya, this may affect and have an impact on her calendar for the rest of the day. So a lot of times we talk about that in the office as well. And, acknowledging the importance of, the flexibility and the fluidity of time in Zambia. Remember we did this last year in the skit.
Yeah.
Or was it 2019? And I remember a lot of people in the audience where they really appreciated us talking about time, but at the same time, they were also quick to acknowledge the importance of being respectful of other people's time. So I think, I really think that's important what you mentioned, but I know whenever I get the chance, I always include and then remind people, I said, well, remember, we have, 8 hours in this workday. After you meet with me, I have to go run and meet with someone else. And then that's so there's always this kind of connecting chain where you have to be mindful that time is a real commodity, because after 1700, everyone disappears. So everyone's trying to do as much as they can from 8:30 to 1700. And then after that, supposedly we stop working, but we're in a new environment where everyone's working 24/7. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Chilufya. You see, so Chilufya went and discussed the importance of, time and directness and even what you just mentioned about communication. And so these are some of these cultural aspects I was not exposed to, some of them I was fortunate to have chances to talk about them in the office, but communicating in a family environment, that's something that I had not appreciated that dynamic before. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Franchesca.
Okay, so I think looking at what we've discussed so far, culture is diverse. And regardless of that, the world has still experienced a lot of globalization. Looking at the previous years, like the past years, the world has experienced a lot of globalization. There's movements, Zambians moving to the United States citizens moving to Zambia for work, others for personal reasons, business, and all that. But I'd like for you to share, Chilufya, for instance, for you to share why it's important to learn about other people's cultures, apart from the influence of globalization. Why is it important for people to learn and appreciate other people's cultures?
Okay, thank you, Melinda. It's always important to know that if you have to find yourself among people different from yourself, you have to be accommodating. And so I'll borrow a thread from what Franchesca said, where she has learned and she started blending in some of the cultures in Zambia. So learning other people's cultures shows respect. When you learn what other people do, they will respect you. And there's that trust which is built between, the two parties. If you trash what other people believe in, they will not like you. And for example, if I went to Western Province and I find they eat opani, they serve me because they put in all their effort. They've welcomed me as their visitor. And then just upon seeing the opani on the plate, I pass disparaging remarks, or I even make facial, expressions. They will not like it. And I would have injured, their ego. So it shows, it's a sign of respect. You just have to do it. Then it fosters effective communication. Franchesca just mentioned how she was able to effectively communicate with Zambians, even when she knew that in Zambia, some people would take time as elastic. She managed to communicate effectively such that I'm sure she impacted on some people to appreciate the importance of time as a commodity. Then it's also vital for program success, whether you like it or not. If you don't appreciate people's cultures, if you've gone to their country and you don't respect their culture, just know that you're not going to succeed. Whatever objectives you put on the table, you're not going to succeed. And it simply expands people's horizons. You have to learn. You have to know what people do. You may think what your practices are the best, but when you learn other people's practices, you discover that actually what they do is even better than what you do. And I like it because Franchesca is really walking the talk here. She's wearing a Zambian attire. It shows she was in Zambia. She's proud of Zambia. And that is what we call learning people's cultures. Okay, Franchesca can come in also on that.
Okay, so of course, I always talk about food. So and before I answer the question, Melinda, just allow me to share this experience. So in the office, we're always, sharing food and candy and chocolates or whatever. And I'm always walking around I guess I used to do this when we were all together in the office, walking around looking for something to eat from someone's desk. And I went to one of my colleagues in the shipping section. I won't say his name, but he was eating caterpillars and enshima. And I said, what is this? I said, let me try it. And so he shared it with me, and I said, this is really good. So of course I said, help me learn how to make it, get me some. So a few days before I left Lusaka, he got me some and I brought it home. And of course my children, and they were like, oh, no, we can't eat this. What is this? What is this? So we prepared it, and I still tried to share with them. I don't know how to make enchima, so someone made the enchima for me. But I was showing them, I said, listen, you guys, this is crunchy. You won't even know these are caterpillars. This is just, it's like, it has onions and tomatoes. And so I shared it with my daughter, and I think it was something that was different for her, but she still ate it. And, she was just wondering, she said, wow, this is much better than I thought. I said, you see, like, you tried it and you like it now. But of course he said, but mommy, please don't give that to me again. I'm not going to eat it again. But I remember just thinking, I said, this is very interesting. This is not something that I would normally just go and ask for, but because my colleague was there, and of course I was hungry, I said, oh, please let me taste some of it. So he just talked about how, the different types of caterpillars, and, they're different kinds, and, different types of groups eat them. So again, I'm always learning about the culture through food. That's how I learn about different cultures. But just to piggyback on what Chilufya was talking about, in understanding other people's cultures, for me personally, as I said, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. We've lived overseas for the past, back and forth over the past 20 years or so. I've always used understanding someone else's culture as a way for me to, like, as a lens to view life from a different perspective. So I really think it's important for people to have that approach, because when you learn about a new culture, it opens your eyes and it opens your perspective. You're not so narrow anymore. Chilufya, you mentioned this, like, it changes how you think. And even for me, it changes how I problem solve, because sometimes I can use my experience from one culture to help diffuse an issue or problem solve in another culture. So it allows you this opportunity to be creative in your problem solving ability. And I really feel blessed to have had that opportunity to live in different countries and meet different people and learn about different cultures. I'm not an expert in Zambian culture, but I feel as though those 2 years that I lived in Zambia, it really helped me grow as a person, as a professional. So I feel blessed for having had that experience. But I really think that the opportunity to live in a different culture, if you allow yourself, you learn, and it helps you to just think differently, see things differently. You see life from the perspective of someone else, and it allows you to gain a better appreciation of things. So that exposure is critical, I think, in terms of human development, because I don't think we were meant to just think and look at things from a narrow perspective. Especially think about yourself as a parent too. I'm a parent, and I feel like it's my responsibility and my duty to also expose my children so that they can grow up to be, proper citizens of the world. So I really appreciate the opportunity to learn from other people's cultures, and it's important that people talk more and share more. And it's true, there are differences, but talk about the differences that make us unique, not the differences that will, keep us separate. Thank you.
And just to echo that point that you've put, when you learn people's cultures, it helps you to shed away the stereotypes that everybody is born into. We are taught things that we haven't even substantiated. So once you give yourself that time to learn what other people do, it will help you to stop judging. Because when you know the truth, you will not judge anyone, okay? I'm sure my fellow Zambians, the stereotypes that we have. Some people say Bembas are thieves, but if you live among Bembas, that's when you're going to learn whether every Bemba is a thief. For example, Tongas are stingy. Live among the Tongas, then you know how they have a giving hand. You arrive there, they give you Chiwantu, they give you Mavisi, and then you know that, oh, I'm living among people who are very generous. So that's the only way to shed off the stereotypes. Let us make it a point to learn people's cultures. Thanks, Franchesca, for learning the Zambian culture.
Yeah.
Well, Linda, may
Hi,
I
Franchesca.
say one more thing? So earlier in our conversation, I talked about the single story, and this is very important what Chilufya just mentioned, learning about a culture so that you can erase those stereotypes, because now you're speaking from this perspective of knowledge and information. You know, you're more informed as a human being. And I don't know if you're aware of this author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She wrote Americana and Half a Yellow Sun.
Yeah.
Half a Yellow Sun. She has a TED Talk where she talks about the single story, and I'm a big fan of hers. But she's Nigerian, but she shares, you know, she's in and out of the U.S. and Nigeria. But we lived in Nigeria back in 2002 or so, 2002 to 2005, and I remember before we left the U.S. When we told our family and friends we were going to Nigeria, a lot of people were like, Nigeria, for real? Like, why Nigeria of all places? I said, well, what do you mean? I said, oh, well, you know, this, and Nigerians and this and this. I said, well, we haven't been there, and the Nigerians that I know in the US are fine, so let's go there and have our own experience. So Chilufya, what you just said, you said that you were talking about Tongas and Bembas, and yes, you may have some people who steal, or maybe some people who are thieves or whatever, but it's not the entire group of people. And that was the same experience in Nigeria. Yes, we met some, but this could be also in America or in Zambia. We met some people who, you know, tried to be shifty, but then we also met some very smart people, some very strong activists, some very good friends. We made, you know, we made good friends there. And I felt so blessed to have had that experience for myself, because after we left Nigeria, we then became ambassadors of Nigeria when we went back home. Because whenever someone would say something about Nigeria, I would stop and say, wait, have you lived in Nigeria? They would say, no. I said, okay, please, I don't want to hear anything that you have to say, because everything they would say would be negative. But because Troy and I, this was before we had children, because we had lived there, we now felt as though, okay, if anyone is around me speaking negatively of Nigeria, because it's one thing to say, okay, I had this one or two experience, but when they talk about the entire population, I said, no, I don't want to hear it. So even now, when we come home and if someone says something about Zambia, I said, no, if you've had one or two experiences with a particular Zambian, that one I can hear. But if you're just going to come and say Zambians this and Zambians that, I said, nope, I don't want to hear it. I've lived there, I've experienced it, you know. So I think that's very important. That single story, we have to be very, very careful. Be very, very careful to apply a single story to you or your people or your country.
Well said, Franchesca.
Yeah, well said. So following through the discussion from the beginning to this point, I think what someone can understand is that culture is a strong human aspect that has the ability to make or break a society. And we've heard of stories and situations, and maybe some of our viewers or listeners have been part of some clashes that have happened due to ethnic or cultural differences and all that. So I would like Chilufya, for you to just help us understand how we can use cultural differences to promote peace, tolerance, and unity, both in the United States and Zambia. I think Franchesca will come in and talk about either United States or Zambia, but generally, how can we promote tolerance, peace, and unity?
Thank you, Melinda. First, let me define what ethnic diversity is. So this is when the presence of different ethnic groupings come together, okay? The presence, so that you have, you know, the diversity. Now, ethnic diversity is very, very important in every aspect of life that you can think of, because it helps dispel the long-age held stereotypes, as I mentioned earlier. When you are in a group, somebody mentions something about, for example, a Luvale, the Luvale will be able to give you the facts because there is diversity. At workplace, Franchesca mentioned to say they were different people. So if she wanted to know the facts about something, she would ask about the person who can give her, you know, information which is correct. Sometimes on the way, people give wrong information because they haven't read, they haven't heard, they just made up stories on their own, and they perpetuate those wrong stories, like the single stories that Franchesca talked about. Then it also helps us to drop the personal biases that we have. You know, we are born in families, we are taught certain things. So you become biased towards a certain grouping or a certain gender and all that. So when you encourage diversity, This will help you drop diversities. Personally, I have friends from all over Zambia, from the tribes of Zambia, and we relate very, very well. They are like sisters to me, they're like brothers to me, very helpful. And so no one will, convince me otherwise to say this particular person is like this. I don't believe in single stories. And then interacting with people from different cultures also helps to build bridges. Trust, respect, as well as understanding. Because if you don't meet to talk as different people, you will not know what your thoughts are, what your ideas are, what your beliefs are. Immediately you meet as a diverse group, you start blending the cultures. Besides, culture is not static. So you enrich your way of thinking, your perspective, by meeting in an ethnic diverse kind of environment. Okay. Franchesca, you can.
So I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I really think that, people need to understand each other. And there is this beauty in sharing about yourself with others and learning about everyone, just like what Chilufya was just saying. And I think, again, exploring what makes us unique as individuals also helps to let us see what makes us the same, if that makes sense to you. Because a lot of times you're so focused on what's different about me and what's different about you. And then as we get to know each other, we realize we have so many more similarities. So I really think that it's important that people have to put in the time and the effort, to share, to understand. Chilufya, like you said, to educate, because it's my responsibility and my duty to also dig deeper so that I can understand about something. I shouldn't just take what you say and then use that as, okay, Chilufya has spoken, this is how I'm going to think. I should be able to take the time to also do my own research and better understand so I can educate myself. So I really think that happens as you get to know each other and you get to talk to people. And I think also when you meet people, you can also sense their bias when they're talking to you about something. Because many times people have said certain things and I've asked them, I said, so why do you say that? And then as you get to know them and you get to understand, you also realize like what you just said, Chilufya. They will say, well, since I was small, this is what my parents said. So as they grew up, unless they've had the opportunity to dispel whatever beliefs that were instilled in them as children, then they believe whatever it is what they were told as children. So that's something that you can sense when you talk to people, because a lot of times people are not sharing this form or this negative stereotype as a result of, like, from their experience. They're talking about something that they grew up with, so they have not had the chance yet to have their own individual experience, because as you just said, Chilufya, they are using that single story to just paint a broad stroke about everyone. When you talk about tolerance and peace and unity, Melinda, people have to talk. In the United States, although we talk about it being a melting pot or being a diverse group of different backgrounds and ethnicities, there are still tensions in the United States. And I think people don't take the time to talk about it. Because when you talk and you figure out, okay, what is this issue that we have? And if you can just discuss things in black and white and not identify solutions from emotion, but just identify solutions that make sense and be factual, then I think people will have a better, will have better success and figuring out ways to, create and encourage more tolerance. But people have to talk. You have to talk, and you have to walk the walk, like you were saying, Chilufya. You can't just talk about something, talk a good game, and then walk away. You have to put in the time, the energy, gather people around. And it shouldn't always be like-minded people. I think sometimes it's important to have a discussion with someone that you disagree with, but you can be respectful in how you discuss your different perspectives. And then you'll realize, okay, actually what this person just said, I may not totally agree with it, but I understand where they're coming from. So I think it's really important. You have to talk and discuss and put in the time.
And before you come in, Linda, I just wanted to say, promoting tolerance, peace, and unity must be our main focus. I started with, by acknowledging our late, the first Republican president, because during his tenure, he would send people to different regions than where they come from. My father, for example, is Bemba, but he trained as a teacher at Chisekesi in Southern Province. So because of that, my father has a broad understanding of different people that he lived among, and he promoted this even as we grew up. He would tell us, would you like to work in this area? There's this thing which is good about it. You can work in this area. You know, because of the ideologies that our founding father of this nation did, he really united us. And then another thing is that it is a responsibility of every citizen to ensure they promote peace. They promote unity. You shouldn't be the one championing fissures. We know the fissures, the tribal fissures have really grown big, but it's our responsibility to narrow them and close them completely through what we do. For example, I've got a background of a teacher. When I'm teaching children or students in my class, they come from different backgrounds. Now, if I'm, drawn to believe that only these people from a region are the best, it means I'll not teach the Zambian children the way I'm supposed to teach as a teacher. So I implore teachers in Zambia to take the flag and make sure they close the fissures that we have seen widening in our country. So that's a point I wanted to emphasize. And also we should know that if we don't champion this peace, we are going to remember the beauty of the peace, because they say water is sweet when the well has dried down. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that well-elaborated point, Chilufya. You spoke about solutions, like finding a solution on how to promote tolerance, peace, and unity among people of the community. I would like someone to highlight how or what strategies we can use to promote peace and unity. There are people would identify, most of the times people would identify the differences, the cultural differences, but would decide to ignore. And then that normally leads to the clashes and all. So what are some of the solutions or strategies that people can use to actually promote and preserve our cultural identity, as well as promote understanding for the cultural differences?
Thank you, Melinda.
Chilufya, I think you can take it.
Yes, thank you so much. I would say education is the most powerful tool that can destroy or build. And this education cuts across the formal education as well as the informal education, both at home and in established institutions. So through our education system, we can ensure that our children learn all the cultures of the country. Regardless of where they are in Luapula province, they have to learn about Western province. That's the only way they will grow up knowing what Zambia really is. You can't say I'm a Zambian if you don't know what happens in other provinces. Then you are half-baked. And so the schools, the curriculum is number one. In the curriculum, they must tell children that we have 73 tribes, and not just the 7 that we watch on TV or listen to on radio. If we don't do that, then the other tribes are in a danger of becoming extinct. So we have to ensure that our children learn. Like I remember when I was in grade 5, there was a book we used to read. They would put different names. For example, Chilufya of Northern Province, Muvita of Southern Province. So like that, we knew, that this is what makes up Zambia, not just where I come from. And that's one thing that I think is going to help us really maintain the culture. Music is very, very important. Franchesca mentioned this point. She mentioned it not once, but twice. So music is very, very important. It's a strategy that brings peace. I'll give an example. Think of the music sung by P.K. Chala of Luapula, Pongozi of the Eastern Province, Emmanuel Mlemena of Northwestern Province, the Mashombe Blue Jeans of Southern Province, Frank Mukano of Western Province, the Kalambo Hit Parade of the Northern Province, the Amayenge Cultural Ensemble of Central, the Lima Jazz Band of Muchinga, Teddy Chilambe of the Copper Belt, just to mention a few. When we listen to this music, you hear how our hearts start throbbing just to go on the dance floor. Why? Because music is a unifier. It is a very important thing that we should use. And lastly, I would say sport. sport is one way in which we are going to help maintain the peace and the unity in our country. Remember when we won the AFCON against Cote d'Ivoire, the whole country, you know, was acting in unison. It's like we had only one heart because everybody was very happy. And I miss that time. If we could think of that time and just work towards that, then Zambia will be a very beautiful place to live in. Apart from that, we need writers. We have to write our culture. We have to write so that the young people coming after us can learn what Zambia really was and not is. Then TV and radio, they have to take responsibility and teach the cultures of our country. And you've heard people say media can destroy or build. I implore the media houses to ensure they teach aspects that will really unite our country. We need that at this time. We also have to record the cultural aspects from elders. We have elders in the communities, different regions of Zambia. We can go there and record them speaking, you know, so that we can put these in museums or take to schools, children listening to elders speaking about our culture. That will really also help us. Lastly, the traditional ceremonies. You know, we have so many traditional ceremonies in Zambia. And during these ceremonies, different people attend. It's not like it's limited to the people of that region. You are allowed to attend at free will. And during these ceremonies, there's so much unity. And I can say that these are some of the things that will help us, you know, build peace and maintain unity in our country, because these two things are very important and are cardinal. Without them, I don't think development will take place. Franchesca, you can come in.
I think that was well articulated, Chilufya. I don't have too much to say. I do, well, so I have two questions though, or yeah. One of them, have you heard of is it the Glorious Band? Is that the band?
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago, maybe I think probably a few days before we left, you know, a group of us went to, it's not Showgrounds, we went somewhere else where they used to have, they usually have the traffic jam. And we were listening to music, and I heard this music and I just started feeling some way. And I was asking him, I said, but who is this band singing? And so the folks were explaining to me that, you know, it was a old band, this is very old music, and they were explaining how the band members just mysteriously passed away one after the other. I was just I found it very fascinating. But the music, you know, music is very important to me. You know, I've heard songs that made me cry. I've heard songs that have transported me to a place of, you know, just beauty, you know, so the music, the melody, the lyrics, I mean, like you mentioned, music is critical. And as you said, you know, you can use that to tell the story of a nation, you know. It's not just there for entertainment, it's there for educating people. You know, when Melinda asked about what are some of the strategies to promote and preserve our cultural identity, I think individuals have to understand their own cultural history first, you know, before they can appreciate and understand their identity, and then, you know, move forward and share and educate others. And I really think that, you know, understanding your history helps you to understand your identity, helps you to appreciate your individual self, and appreciate the contributions of those who came before you, you know. If you demonstrate an appreciation of culture by, you know, you talk about it, you promote it, you explore it, you research it, you share it. And that's like what you were talking about, Chilufya, the importance of teachers, you know. But it's important that we not be passive, because we shouldn't just sit and wait for the teacher to teach us. We also have to do some of our own self-teaching as well, and exploring. And I think what you said is very important. You were talking about, in the Zambian context, teachers sharing the contributions of all tribe members, right? All different tribes, all citizens of Zambia. And I would say that's the same in the US. You know, you have to be careful, especially when you're teaching children. Children have impressionable minds. So it's important that you share the contributions of, you know, Native Americans to the United States, to the American culture, the contributions of African Americans, the contributions of Latin Americans, the contribution of Asian Americans. I mean, it's such a diverse country that you can't just say one particular group has developed the US. So it's really important that you give children or your students, whether they be adults or children, the wider, broader perspective. Okay, because it's also, you know, this helps you to also know that a teacher may not be all knowing. That's why sometimes it's important that you have what you're learning in school, but then you come